Welcome to News Beacon, your trusted source for breaking headlines, global insights, and sharp analysis from around the world. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. In March 2025, China abruptly halted all new imports of American beef, sending shockwaves through the U.S. agricultural industry. The Chinese market, worth $1.2 billion in 2024, was the third largest for American beef exporters. Years of investment to meet China's standards vanished overnight. Instead of a formal ban, China simply let export registrations for hundreds of U.S. beef facilities expire. Without these registrations, American beef couldn't enter China. Shipments already en route might clear, but anything produced after March 16th was blocked. This administrative move paralyzed the industry, leaving exporters with unsellable products. Chinese buyers, fearing rejection at the port, stopped placing new orders. U.S. meatpackers were left scrambling to find new buyers for beef tailored to Chinese tastes. The halt came as the U.S. beef industry was already struggling with high cattle prices and tight supply. Major companies like Tyson, Cargill, and JBS, who had invested heavily in China-approved facilities, faced major losses. The closure wasn't just a headline, it threatened thousands of American jobs and the stability of the entire cattle industry. The sudden loss of China as a market forced a complete rethink of business strategies. The industry was left with a massive void and no easy solutions. The ripple effects were immediate and severe. The U.S. beef industry was thrown into crisis. The halt in U.S. beef trade was triggered by China's refusal to renew export licenses for American facilities. The GACC, China's customs authority, simply let hundreds of U.S. beef plant registrations expire in March 2025. Despite repeated U.S. requests, Beijing stayed silent, and the trade stopped. This bureaucratic move allowed China to block imports without a formal ban. The decision was a direct response to escalating trade tensions. In February, the U.S. doubled tariffs on Chinese goods to 20%, prompting swift retaliation. On March 10th, China raised duties on U.S. agricultural products, including beef. Higher tariffs made American beef less competitive, but the expired licenses shut the door completely. This two-step approach, tariffs then administrative cutoff, showed China was weaponizing agricultural trade. Interestingly, China renewed licenses for U.S. pork and poultry, targeting beef specifically. By hitting beef, China inflicted maximum pain on a key U.S. export sector. The move was calculated, not a blanket rejection of all American meat. The fate of U.S. beef exports was now tied to broader trade negotiations. The beef industry found itself a pawn in a larger geopolitical battle. The message was clear. Agricultural trade is now a tool of international leverage. U.S. exporters faced a new era of uncertainty. The rules of global trade had changed overnight. The numbers reveal the devastation. Before the halt, U.S. beef exports to China averaged over 2,000 metric tons per week. After the cutoff, sales plunged to just 54 metric tons in a single week, a near-total collapse. Billions in projected sales for 2025 vanished instantly. The loss rippled from meatpacking giants to individual ranchers who had banked on Chinese demand. Agricultural economists described the trade as basically at zero. The broader U.S. meat export relationship with China, worth over $3 billion, was suddenly unstable. Even with pork and poultry licenses renewed, the sense of insecurity grew. U.S. beef producers scrambled to find new buyers, but replacing $1.2 billion in sales was nearly impossible. Other countries had their own suppliers and regulations. Cuts popular in China weren't always in demand elsewhere, forcing U.S. companies to sell at a discount or flood the domestic market. Prices at home risked falling, hurting ranchers further. The collapse exposed the fragility of relying on a single export market. The industry's export strategy was in ruins. The financial shock was immediate and severe. The U.S. beef sector was left on unstable ground. The numbers told a story of sudden total loss. With the U.S. locked out, a $1.2 billion gap opened in China's beef market. Russia moved quickly to fill the void. Years of building agricultural ties with China paid off for Moscow. As U.S.-China tensions grew, China turned to Russia for reliable supplies. The trade war accelerated this shift. Russia's beef industry, though smaller, seized the chance to capture a lucrative market. This wasn't just business, it was a strategic realignment. Russia's win was celebrated as proof of its growing global influence. The new trade axis between Russia and China reduced China's dependence on the West. For the US, it was a wake-up call. Market access can vanish overnight. The global meat trade map was redrawn. American dominance was no longer guaranteed. Russia's rise as a supplier signaled a new era of competition. The effects would be long-lasting. China's decision wasn't just about trade war, it was also about protecting its own farmers. Leading up to March 2025, China faced a glut of meat and falling prices. Domestic producers, especially cattle farmers, were losing money. The government was under pressure to act. In late 2024, China launched an anti-dumping probe into beef imports. The timing of the U.S. export license expirations coincided with this investigation. Blocking U.S. beef helped reduce supply and stabilize prices for Chinese farmers. It was a protectionist move, shielding a vulnerable sector. The pork industry faced similar struggles with oversupply and price drops. Controlling imports was a direct way to support local producers. The trade dispute with the U.S. provided political cover for a decision China likely wanted for domestic reasons. The halt was as much about economic self-preservation as retaliation. Supporting millions of rural farmers was a top priority for Beijing. The move served both political and economic goals. China's crackdown on beef imports hit more than just the U.S. In March 2025, China also suspended imports from factories in Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay. These countries, heavily reliant on China, faced major disruptions. Even temporary suspensions caused financial pain and supply chain chaos. The message: China would tighten control over imports to manage its own market. Global suppliers realized access to China was no longer guaranteed. Some South American factories remained open, while others were shut out, creating fierce competition. Political relationships with Beijing became crucial for market access. The global beef market grew more fragmented and unpredictable. Countries scrambled to secure their place in China's market or find new buyers. The ripple effect depressed prices elsewhere and forced strategic shifts. Trade was now dictated as much by politics as by economics. China's actions forced every nation to adapt. The March 2025 crisis didn't come out of nowhere. Warning signs appeared months earlier, when a few U.S. meat plant registrations quietly lapsed. This hinted at trouble with the renewal process. By late March, hundreds more registrations were set to expire. The USDA tried repeatedly to get answers from Beijing. None came. The silence signaled a deliberate move, not a bureaucratic error. The trade war context made retaliation likely. When the U.S. doubled tariffs in February, China's response was predictable. Retaliatory tariffs on U.S. farm goods followed in March. The combination of tariffs and license expirations pointed to an imminent crisis. Despite the signs, the U.S. beef industry was caught off guard. Many believed the relationship was too valuable to sever. The failure to heed warnings left the industry unprepared for the sudden loss. The collapse of the Chinese beef market hit American farmers and workers hard. Family ranchers who invested to meet Chinese standards now face falling prices and deep uncertainty. Meat processing plants, employing thousands, are under financial strain. Companies may cut hours, slow production, or lay off workers. Rural communities built around agriculture feel the ripple effects. Local businesses suffer as money dries up. The loss of a $1.2 billion market threatens the stability of rural America. Farmers and workers are left hoping for new export opportunities or a reopening of the Chinese market. In the meantime, they face financial hardship and anxiety. The true cost of the trade dispute is measured in lost livelihoods and economic insecurity. The backbone of the American food system is under threat. The 2025 China beef crisis marks a turning point for global agriculture. Trade is now driven as much by geopolitics as by economics. The U.S. can no longer count on stable access to key markets. Exporters must diversify and reduce dependence on any single country. Building new markets will require investment and adaptability. Russia's rise as a supplier to China redraws the competitive landscape. A new Russia-China trade axis challenges Western dominance. The global market is more fragmented, with alliances shaping trade flows. Long-term planning is harder than ever. Volatility and competition are the new normal. Success now demands geopolitical savvy and rapid adaptation. The events of 2025 are a wake-up call for American agriculture. The future belongs to those who can navigate uncertainty and change.